This seat is for real passengers. Economy is in the back. Jennifer Bailey's voice sliced through the hushed conversations of the first-class cabin, sharp and dismissive as she stared down at the man standing calmly in the aisle. At 7:45 a.m. on a crisp Thursday morning inside Atlantic Airways Flight 302, those 9 words fell like a gavel striking Devon Thompson with practiced precision. Not because they surprised him, but because deep down he had been expecting them. The luxurious first-class cabin of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, with its wide leather seats and polished wooden accents, suddenly felt colder as conversations stopped and heads turned. 24 passengers paused mid-sip of their pre-departure champagne eyes, shifting to witness the confrontation unfolding in the soft morning light filtering through the windows. Devon Thompson, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit with no designer logos, held his boarding pass in one hand and maintained eye contact with the flight attendant. His expression remained neutral, revealing neither anger nor surprise, just quiet observation. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been judged solely on your appearance? That moment when someone takes one look at you and decides they know exactly who you are and where you belong. Drop your experience in the comments below. And if you believe everyone deserves dignity regardless of how they look or what they wear, hit that subscribe button and share this video. Because in exactly 8 minutes, everything you think you know about power, prejudice, and consequences is about to change forever. The Los Angeles International Airport bustled outside the aircraft windows, ground crews moving with purpose across the tarmac as the early morning sun cast long shadows. Inside the cabin, time seemed to freeze in that moment. Jennifer's arm extended, pointing toward economy class, her professionally made-up face set in what she clearly thought was authority. What she didn't know was that her gesture had just triggered a chain of events that would transform an entire industry and touch millions of lives. All because she decided in an instant that Devon Thompson didn't belong. Devon Thompson stood 6'1" with the straight-backed posture of someone comfortable in any room. At 45 years old, his close-cropped hair showed distinguished touches of gray at the temples, and fine lines around his eyes spoke of years of problem-solving and responsibility. His charcoal Tom Ford suit was perfectly tailored but deliberately understated, no flashy accessories or logos that screamed wealth. Just the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. On his wrist, a vintage Patek Philippe watch, not the newest model, but one with history and meaning. He carried a well-worn leather briefcase, its quality evident in the patina that only comes from years of use. Everything about him spoke of earned success rather than inherited privilege. What the flight attendant couldn't see was Devon's journey, how he had started with nothing but determination and a scholarship to MIT, sleeping on a friend's couch while developing his first aviation software. How he had built Skyline Aviation from a tiny consulting firm into a revolutionary force in the airline industry, eventually acquiring enough capital to purchase and transform 3 struggling airlines into the now thriving Atlantic Airways. As Jennifer's dismissive words hung in the air, Devon's mind flashed briefly to a memory 20 years earlier, standing at another counter holding another ticket hearing. Another voice tell him he didn't belong. He'd been 25 then, dressed in his only suit for his first major investor meeting. The service entrance is around back, the receptionist had told him without looking up. That day had changed everything, cementing his resolve to build something that would force the world to see him, to see everyone differently. Today, Devon's net worth exceeded $3.8 billion. But he still drove the same car he'd bought after his first major contract. His mother had taught him that true character reveals itself when no one important is watching, which is exactly why he was on this flight today, dressed without the trappings of his position, boarding like any other passenger. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," Devon said calmly, extending his boarding pass. "I'm in seat 1A. Jennifer Bailey, 32, took the boarding pass between manicured fingertips as though it might be contaminated. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a tight regulation bun, and her Atlantic Airways uniform was pristine. She had worked for the airline for 7 years, starting before Devon's company had acquired it, and had been promoted to senior flight attendant based on passenger satisfaction scores from the airline's highest-spending customers. "This must be a mistake," she said, not even bothering to verify the information in the system. "First class is fully booked with our regular passengers." From seat 2B, Richard Wilson lowered his Financial Times newspaper and scoffed audibly. At 55, with silver hair and a custom-tailored suit that screamed old money, Wilson was the type of passenger Jennifer was accustomed to serving. "There's clearly been a mix-up," Richard said loudly. "That's actually supposed to be my colleague's seat. He's running late." He glanced at Devon with naked disdain. "People are always trying to sneak upgrades they didn't pay for." Richard's wife, Pamela, 52, elegantly dressed with a string of pearls around her neck, clutched her designer purse tighter against her side as Devon stood near her seat. She exchanged knowing glances with Jennifer, a silent communication between women who considered themselves the gatekeepers of exclusive spaces. Devon noticed everything: Jennifer's immediate assumption, Richard's territorial claim, Pamela's clutched purse. He noticed how Miguel Rodriguez, the 28-year-old junior flight attendant restocking the galley, paused to watch the interaction, discomfort evident in his expression, before he quickly looked away. This was exactly why Devon had boarded the flight today, not as the CEO in the executive suite, but as a regular passenger. Atlantic Airways had been underperforming in customer satisfaction metrics despite all the operational improvements he'd implemented. The numbers suggested a disconnect between policy and practice, especially in how diverse passengers were treated. Rather than trust reports or second-hand accounts, Devon believed in seeing reality firsthand. And now reality was unfolding exactly as he had suspected it might. "Please check your system," Devon suggested to Jennifer, his voice measured and professional. "The ticket is legitimate." Jennifer's smile tightened. "Sir, perhaps you'd be more comfortable in economy. I can help you find your correct seat." Around them, the other first-class passengers were taking notice. Some studiously looked away, suddenly fascinated by the safety cards in their seat backs. Others watched with poorly disguised interest. A few seemed uncomfortable with the situation but said nothing. In seat 3C, Laura Garcia, a 41-year-old Hispanic woman dressed in a sharp business suit, frowned at the interaction. As the CEO of a mid-sized tech company, she was all too familiar with being the only person of color in executive spaces. She caught Devon's eye briefly, a flash of recognition and solidarity passing between them. Devon maintained his composure, years of boardroom negotiations having taught him the power of staying calm when others expect anger. He knew what Jennifer saw when she looked at him, not the businessman, the innovator, or the CEO, but simply a black man who in her mind couldn't possibly belong in first class. "I'd prefer to sit in my assigned seat," Devon replied, still cordial but firm. "1A, as printed on my boarding pass." The tension in the cabin thickened as Jennifer's professional mask slipped, slightly irritation flashing across her features. This wasn't going the way these interactions usually went. Most passengers she intimidated this way would have backed down by now, embarrassed or afraid of causing a scene. But Devon Thompson wasn't most passengers, though no one on the flight knew that yet. What they would soon discover was that the man standing calmly in the aisle had transformed 3 airlines, revolutionized aviation logistics software, and was currently worth more than the entire senior executive team of Atlantic Airways combined. For now, though, he was just a passenger being told he didn't belong. "Sir, I've worked this route for 5 years, and I know all our regular first-class passengers," Jennifer insisted, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "There must be some confusion with your ticket." Devon's expression remained neutral as he pointed to the boarding pass still in her hand. "The seat number is clearly printed right there. Would you mind checking your passenger manifest?" Jennifer reluctantly pulled out her tablet, making a show of the inconvenience. Her fingers tapped the screen several times, her frown deepening. She had expected to find a discrepancy, not confirmation. "There appears to be a reservation under Thompson," she admitted reluctantly, "but I'm sure there's been a mistake in the system." She looked up at him with renewed suspicion. "May I see your ID?" Devon reached into his jacket and produced his driver's license, which Jennifer scrutinized much more carefully than she had for any other passenger. From his peripheral vision, Devon noticed Miguel watching the interaction from the galley, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "This is highly irregular," Jennifer muttered, though the ID clearly matched the reservation. As the confrontation continued, Devon felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Not anxiety, but a controlled anger he'd learned to channel productively over decades of similar encounters. His heart rate remained steady, each beat a reminder of the countless times he'd stood his ground while being told in ways both subtle and overt that he didn't belong. His breathing stayed measured, and even a technique his mentor, Dr. James Harrington, had taught him years ago: let the breath ground you when the world tries to move you. Richard Wilson, who had been watching the exchange with growing impatience, stood up. At 6'2", with the confident posture of someone used to commanding rooms, he towered over Jennifer. "Look, we're already running late," he said irritably. "Just put him in economy so we can take off. I have a meeting to get to in New York." He turned to Devon, not bothering to hide his contempt. "You people are always holding things up." The phrase "you people" hung in the air like toxic smoke. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Richard whispered his daughter Emma from the row behind. The 16-year-old looked mortified, her face flushing with embarrassment at her father's behavior. Devon met Richard's gaze steadily. "And what people would that be?" "Sir." Richard faltered, momentarily aware he'd crossed a line that couldn't be easily uncrossed. "People who don't understand the check-in procedures," he amended weakly. "I understand them perfectly," Devon replied, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel beneath. "I have a valid first-class ticket for seat 1A on this flight. I checked in online. I arrived at the gate on time, and now I'm being denied the seat I paid for." Jennifer intervened quickly. "No one is denying you anything, sir. We're simply trying to sort out a confusion." "There is no confusion," Devon stated. "The confusion seems to be why you're questioning my right to sit in a seat I purchased." By now, several passengers had taken out their phones. Anthony Parker, a 34-year-old black tech entrepreneur seated in 4C, was discreetly recording the interaction. He had experienced similar situations himself and recognized what was happening. A few rows back, an elderly white woman named Eleanor Simmons, who had previously been absorbed in her novel, removed her reading glasses and observed the scene with growing displeasure. She caught Devon's eye momentarily, giving him a subtle nod of support. "I'm going to need to call security if you continue to be disruptive," Jennifer warned, her hand moving toward the cabin phone. "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't made demands. I've simply asked to sit in my assigned seat," Devon pointed out. "How exactly am I being disruptive?" Jennifer's cheeks flushed. "Your attitude is creating tension in the cabin. I think the tension was created when you immediately directed me to economy without checking my ticket," Devon replied. Pamela Wilson leaned forward from her seat. "Jennifer, perhaps you should call Victoria. This is delaying everyone." On cue, Victoria Lawrence, the 47-year-old head of cabin services, emerged from the front galley. With 20 years of experience and an air of unquestionable authority, she quickly assessed the situation, or rather what she assumed the situation to be. "What seems to be the problem here?" she asked, her gaze falling immediately on Devon rather than Jennifer. "This passenger claims to have a ticket for 1A, but there seems to be some confusion," Jennifer explained, emphasis on the word claims. Victoria extended her hand for the boarding pass. "May I?" Without waiting for Devon's permission, she took it from Jennifer and examined it briefly. "Sir, while we sort this out, perhaps you'd be more comfortable waiting in economy," Victoria suggested, her tone making it clear this wasn't really a suggestion. We can always move you back if it turns out there's been a mistake. Devon remained unmoved. I'd prefer to wait right here while you verify my seat assignment, which I'm confident you'll find is correct. Victoria's professional smile tightened. Sir, you're holding up the departure of this flight. I'm not holding up anything, Devon responded. I'm simply waiting to sit in the seat I purchased, Richard interjected again. This is ridiculous. He's clearly in the wrong section. Just look at him. The cabin went silent. Richard's words had laid bare what had been implicit in the entire exchange. And how exactly should a first-class passenger look? Mr. Wilson Devon asked quietly. Richard stammered, suddenly aware of the phones recording the interaction. I just meant, you don't seem like you... It's just that... From across the aisle, Laura Garcia finally spoke up. Excuse me, but could someone just check his ticket properly? This is getting embarrassing. Eleanor Simmons joined in, her voice carrying the authority of her 78 years. I've been flying first class for 4 decades, and I've never seen such treatment of a passenger with a valid ticket. Check his reservation properly, or I'll be filing a formal complaint. Victoria shot Laura and Eleanor looks of betrayal before turning back to Devon. Sir, I understand you believe you have a valid ticket, but I don't believe anything, Devon interrupted firmly. I know I have a valid ticket because I purchased it myself. Miguel stepped forward hesitantly. Ms. Lawrence, I can check the system again if you'd like. Victoria waved him off. That won't be necessary, Miguel. I have the situation under control. She turned back to Devon. Sir, I need to ask you to move to economy or deplane. You're delaying this flight for everyone. I will not be moving to economy, Devon stated calmly. And I will not be deplaning. I will be sitting in seat 1A, which is mine. Then I'll have to call security, Victoria threatened, reaching for the cabin phone. Devon nodded once. Do what you feel is necessary. But before you make that call, I suggest you check my reservation thoroughly. The name is Thompson. Devon Thompson. Victoria paused, something in Devon's tone finally registering. Thompson. As in... Devon didn't confirm or deny her sudden suspicion. He simply waited. Victoria quickly tapped on the tablet color draining from her face as she scrolled through whatever information appeared on the screen. Is there a problem? Devon asked. Victoria looked up, her expression completely transformed. No, sir. No problem at all. Your seat is 1A, as you said. Jennifer looked confused. Victoria, what's Mr. Thompson is indeed in the correct seat. Victoria cut her off sharply. Please ensure he's settled comfortably immediately. The abrupt change in attitude wasn't lost on the other passengers, who exchanged puzzled glances. Something had shifted dramatically, though most didn't yet understand what. Devon remained standing. I'd like to know why I was initially directed to economy without any verification of my ticket. Victoria swallowed hard. I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding, Mr. Thompson. We value all our passengers and... That's not what I asked, Devon interrupted quietly. I asked why your senior flight attendant took one look at me and decided I belonged in economy. The question hung in the air, unanswerable, without admitting the prejudice behind it. At that moment, Emma Wilson stood up from her seat. Because they judged you based on how you look. Not your ticket, not your reservation, just you. She glanced at her father, a mixture of disappointment and defiance in her expression. And it was wrong. Have you ever witnessed someone speaking truth to power like Emma just did? Share your story in the comments below. We all need examples of courage in action. Victoria's face had gone completely pale. Mr. Thompson, I assure you this isn't how we typically operate. If you'd like to speak privately, I think we've had enough privacy around these issues. Devon replied. That's part of the problem. He turned to address Jennifer directly. You made a snap judgment based solely on my appearance. You didn't check my boarding pass. You didn't verify my identity. You simply decided I didn't belong here. Jennifer stammered. Sir, that's not what I'd like you to be honest. At least, Devon interrupted. We all know what happened here. Victoria tried to salvage the situation. Mr. Thompson, I understand you're upset, but I'm sure Jennifer meant no offense. Now, if you'd please take your seat, we can ensure your flight is comfortable, and I don't think you understand the situation, Devon said calmly. This isn't about my comfort anymore. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face as he waited for the other end to pick up. This is Devon Thompson. I need you to activate Protocol 7, he said into the phone, then ended the call without further explanation. Victoria's expression shifted from professional concern to genuine alarm. As head of cabin services, she knew what Protocol 7 meant, even if no one else in the cabin did. It was the code for an executive-level intervention, typically only used for major safety concerns or security threats. Mr. Thompson, surely that's not necessary, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Devon took a seat not in 1A, but in an empty aisle seat nearby. I think it's long overdue, actually. As he sat down, Devon felt a subtle vibration in his pocket. A text from Amara Watson, his chief of staff and longest-serving colleague. Protocol 7 activated. Thomas en route. Board notified. You okay? The simple message reminded Devon that he wasn't standing alone, even when it felt like it. Amara had been with him since the early days, one of the few people who had believed in his vision when Skyline Aviation was just 3 people in a rented office space. Fine. Proceeding as planned, he texted back, his thumb moving discreetly under the cover of his jacket. The atmosphere in this cabin had shifted from tension to confusion. Passengers exchanged puzzled glances, sensing something significant was happening without understanding what. Richard Wilson leaned across the aisle. What's going on? Who exactly are you? Devon didn't answer, his attention focused on the aircraft door, which had just reopened despite the scheduled departure time having passed. Thomas Reynolds, the 50-year-old regional director of Atlantic Airways, boarded the plane with a grim expression. Tall and distinguished with salt and pepper hair, he moved with the purposeful stride of someone responding to an emergency. Behind him followed 2 members of the executive staff, both looking equally concerned. Victoria immediately approached him, speaking in hushed tones. Thomas's gaze found Devon recognition and alarm crossing his features. Jennifer's phone buzzed with a message. As she read it, her professional composure crumbled. She looked from her phone to Devon, then back again, shock replacing her previous condescension. Her hands began to tremble and the color drained from her face as she realized the magnitude of her error. This wasn't just a misstep, this was potentially career-ending. Miguel, watching from the galley, also received a notification. His eyes widened as he read whatever had appeared on his screen. Thomas approached Devon, extending his hand. Mr. Thompson, I can't begin to apologize enough for this situation. Devon didn't take the offered hand. I'm not interested in apologies at the moment, Thomas. I'm interested in accountability. Of course. Thomas nodded, visibly uncomfortable. Would you prefer to deplane? We can arrange private transportation. No, Devon said firmly. I'm not leaving this seat, but someone will be. The implication was clear, sending a ripple of whispers through the cabin. Richard Wilson, still not grasping the situation, fully interjected. Excuse me, but some of us have schedules to keep. What's the delay about? Thomas turned to him with barely concealed contempt. Sir, I suggest you sit down and remain quiet. This situation is beyond anything you want to involve yourself in further. Richard bristled. Do you know who I am? I'm a Platinum Elite member. And he? Thomas interrupted, gesturing to Devon is the CEO and majority owner of Atlantic Airways and its parent company Skyline Aviation. The revelation hit the cabin like a thunderclap. Audible gasps came from several passengers. Jennifer looked as though she might faint, while Victoria stood frozen in horror. Richard sank back into his seat, the color draining from his face as he finally understood the magnitude of his behavior. Devon rose slowly, buttoning his jacket as he addressed Thomas. "I think it's time we had a conversation about the culture of this airline." As Devon stood, another text message arrived from Amara Alexandra Marshall, legal advising caution on public statements. Media already picking up buzz. Devon appreciated the counsel, but knew this moment required more than legal caution. This was about transformation, not damage control. Noted. Proceeding with full transparency, he texted back quickly. Devon caught Anthony Parker's eye, nodding slightly in acknowledgement of the recording he knew was happening. Some moments needed witnesses. Have you ever been underestimated only to reveal your true position later? What was that moment like? Share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear your story of recognition denied then forcibly acknowledged. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thomas Reynolds announced to the cabin, his voice carrying the practiced calm of crisis management. "I apologize for the delay. We're experiencing a leadership transition moment." A murmur rippled through the first-class cabin as passengers exchanged glances, some confused, others beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. Devon Thompson stood now, his presence suddenly filling the cabin in a way it hadn't before. It wasn't that he physically changed. He was the same height, wore the same understated suit, but something had shifted in how everyone perceived him. The invisible mantle of authority he had deliberately set aside earlier had been reclaimed. "For those of you who don't know me," Devon said, his voice measured and clear. "I'm Devon Thompson, CEO of Skyline Aviation and the principal owner of Atlantic Airways." The cabin fell completely silent. Jennifer Bailey's face had lost all color, her hands trembling visibly now as she clutched the tablet against her chest like a shield. A single tear escaped before she could blink it back, the reality of her situation finally hitting her with full force. Victoria Lawrence stood rigidly beside Thomas, her expression locked in a rictus of professional composure while panic danced in her eyes. "I wasn't planning to identify myself on this flight," Devon continued. "I make a habit of experiencing our service as our customers do without the special treatment that comes with recognition." His gaze swept across the cabin, making brief eye contact with several passengers before landing on Jennifer. "What I experienced today wasn't a misunderstanding or a simple mistake. It was a deeply rooted bias that has no place in this airline or in our society." Richard Wilson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, attempting to make himself smaller, a stark contrast to his domineering presence minutes earlier. Pamela's hand found his arm, squeezing it anxiously as if physical contact might somehow protect them from the consequences unfolding. "I know you came," Emma Wilson's voice from her seat. "I did a school project on you last year. You revolutionized airline logistics with your software before buying your first airline." Devon smiled at her genuine warmth, breaking through his serious demeanor. "That's right." "And what was the most important value I emphasized in building those companies?" Emma didn't hesitate. "Dignity. You said transportation isn't just about moving bodies, it's about honoring the humanity of everyone who travels." "Exactly." Devon nodded, turning back to the wider cabin. "Yet today I watched as that core value was violated. Not through mechanical failure or operational oversight, but through human prejudice." Thomas stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No," Devon said firmly. "Privacy has protected these behaviors for too long. This will be addressed openly." He walked slowly down the aisle, his movements deliberate and controlled. "When I boarded this flight, Ms. Bailey didn't check my ticket before telling me to go to economy. When I presented my valid boarding pass, Ms. Lawrence suggested I move to economy while they sorted things out, despite clear evidence I was in the right place." Devon stopped beside Richard's seat. and Mr. Wilson here felt comfortable enough in this environment to make assumptions about who I was based solely on my appearance. Richard stared straight ahead, unwilling to meet Devon's gaze or anyone else's. "I want to be absolutely clear," Devon continued, addressing the entire cabin. "This isn't about embarrassing individuals. This is about acknowledging a pattern that affects countless passengers every day who don't happen to own the airline they're flying." Laura Garcia nodded from her seat, a gesture of solidarity and understanding. "The difference today," Devon said, "is that I'm in a position to do something about it." His mind flashed briefly to Dr. Harrington, his mentor and the first investor in Skyline Aviation. As a respected black physician who had faced similar barriers, James had not only provided capital, but wisdom. "Devon, when you finally gain the power to change things, don't waste it on revenge. Use it for reconstruction." He turned to Thomas. "Effective immediately. Jennifer Bailey and Victoria Lawrence are relieved of their duties on this flight and suspended pending review. Please arrange for replacement crew." The declaration sent another shock wave through the cabin. Jennifer's professional composure finally crumbled, tears welling in her eyes. "Mr. Thompson, please," she began. "I have a perfect service record." "I didn't mean—" "That's precisely the problem," Devon interrupted, not unkindly but firmly. "You didn't consciously mean to discriminate. It was instinctive, habitual, which makes it all the more concerning. Your perfect service record exists alongside the experience I just had, which means we're not measuring the right things." Victoria remained silent, her career flashing before her eyes. Her shoulders slumped slightly, the first genuine reaction since her arrival. Devon turned to Miguel, who had been watching from the galley. "Mr. Rodriguez, your discomfort with the situation was evident, yet you didn't intervene. That's something we'll need to address throughout our organization, the courage to speak up when values are being violated." Miguel nodded solemnly, accepting the critique without defensiveness. "You're right, sir. I knew it was wrong, but I've seen what happens to people who speak up. I was afraid. That fear is exactly what we need to eliminate," Devon replied. "An environment where people are afraid to do the right thing is broken at its foundation." Richard Wilson finally found his voice. "Look, this was clearly just a misunderstanding. We're all under pressure. Flights are stressful." "No, Mr. Wilson," Devon cut him off. "Stress doesn't create prejudice, it merely reveals it. You felt comfortable making your comments because you assumed everyone in authority would agree with you. That assumption says everything about the culture we need to change." Pamela Wilson clutched her husband's arm, whispering urgently for him to be quiet. Devon addressed Thomas again. "I'll be taking this flight as planned. Please ensure replacement crew is brought on board immediately. And Thomas," his voice hardened slightly, "we'll discuss your oversight of these issues at headquarters tomorrow." Thomas nodded stiffly. "Yes, sir. Right away." As Thomas escorted Jennifer and Victoria toward the exit, Devon returned to seat 1A, his rightful place. The other passengers watched in stunned silence, many still processing what they had just witnessed. Anthony Parker, who had recorded much of the interaction, put his phone away with a satisfied nod. Laura Garcia caught Devon's eye and gave him a small smile of approval. Eleanor Simmons reached across the aisle to briefly touch Devon's arm in a gesture of respect. As Devon settled into his seat, Emma Wilson approached hesitantly. "Mr. Thompson," her voice was quiet, almost reverent. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how my parents treated you. It was wrong." Devon's expression softened. "Thank you, Emma. It takes courage to recognize when those closest to us are wrong. I've been thinking about going into business ethics," she continued, her voice gaining confidence. "Reading about your company's values was actually what inspired me. I want to help build organizations where everyone is treated with dignity." "That's a worthy goal," Devon assured her. The business world needs more voices like yours. Could I maybe talk with you more about it sometime? I have so many questions about how you align ethics with business success. Devon smiled. I'd be happy to continue our conversation during the flight. As Emma returned to her seat, Devon noticed Richard watching their interaction, something like shame finally crossing his features as he witnessed his daughter's integrity. The replacement crew boarded efficiently, Jackson Williams, the 52-year-old chief of service operations, personally taking charge of the cabin, along with two senior attendants, Danielle Foster and Michael Chen. The contrast in their behavior was immediate and striking. They greeted each passenger with equal respect, their professionalism untainted by prejudice. When Jackson approached Devon, there was respect in his manner, but no sycophancy. Mr. Thompson, it's an honor to serve you today. Is there anything you need before we prepare for takeoff? Just equal treatment for every passenger, Jackson. That's all I've ever wanted. Jackson nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. That's our standard, sir. For everyone. Devon observed it all quietly from seat 1A, not as CEO, but as a passenger finally receiving the respect every passenger deserved. He pulled out his phone one last time before takeoff, sending a message to a Mara flight proceeding. Prepare for full overhaul. It's time for the Thompson Protocol. The moment you've just witnessed will lead to industry-wide changes. What do you think is the most important step in ensuring equal treatment for all passengers? Share your thoughts below. The aircraft pushed back from the gate 45 minutes behind schedule, the gentle rumble of engines breaking the lingering tension in the first-class cabin. Jackson Williams moved efficiently through his safety demonstration, his professionalism evident in every gesture. The two new flight attendants, Danielle Foster and Michael Chen, prepared the cabin for takeoff with practiced precision. Mr. Thompson Jackson approached with deference. Would you prefer private dining in the executive suite? We can arrange it immediately. Devon shook his head. No, thank you. I'll remain in my assigned seat with the same service as other first-class passengers. Jackson nodded respectfully. Of course, sir. As the plane climbed to cruising altitude, Devon opened his laptop reviewing reports as the plane climbed to cruising altitude. Around him, conversations gradually resumed, though more subdued than before takeoff. Many passengers stole glances in his direction, their perception of him fundamentally altered by the revelation of his identity. Devon's phone buzzed with a series of encrypted messages from his leadership team who had been alerted to the situation through Protocol 7, from Amara Watson, Chief of Staff Board Chairman Morris, requesting emergency briefing. Media already speculating. Video clips circulating online. From Alexandra Marshall, Chief Legal Officer. Recommend careful public statement. Exploring legal implications for terminated employees. From Dr. James Harrington, mentor and board member, standing with you on this one. The moment was inevitable. Make it count. That last message brought a small smile to Devon's face. At 72, Dr. Harrington remained his most trusted advisor, the man who had seen potential in a young engineer with big ideas but no connections. James had faced similar barriers in his own career, the first black chief of surgery at Boston Memorial Hospital, and had taught Devon that true leadership wasn't about avoiding conflict, but about choosing the right battles. Devon responded to them all with a single message, proceeding with full implementation of Thompson Protocol. No half measures. This is our moment for real change. Richard and Pamela Wilson sat in uncomfortable silence, the social standing they'd taken for granted now precarious. Richard repeatedly loosened his tie, a nervous gesture betraying his anxiety. Pamela maintained her composure better, though. Her eyes darted frequently toward Devon, calculating the damage to their reputation. After the seatbelt sign turned off, Miguel Rodriguez approached Devon's seat, his expression a mix of determination and apprehension. Mr. Thompson, he began hesitantly. May I speak with you? Devon closed his laptop. Of course, Miguel. Miguel lowered his voice. I want to apologize for not speaking up earlier. You're right. I saw what was happening and stayed silent. Why? Devon asked simply. Miguel glanced around before answering. Honestly, I need this job. I've seen what happens to people who challenge senior crew members, especially when they look like me. Tell me more about that, Devon encouraged, genuinely interested. Miguel hesitated, then continued. Last year, I reported a similar incident. A first-class passenger from India was questioned repeatedly about his seat assignment. I filed a formal complaint. 2 weeks later, I was put on probation for customer service issues. The message was clear. Devon nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly the problem we need to solve. Fear shouldn't be the governing emotion for our employees. It's not just Atlantic Airways, Miguel added. I've worked for 3 airlines. It's the same everywhere. Then change needs to start somewhere, Devon replied. Thank you for your honesty, Miguel. I may have more questions for you later. As Miguel returned to his duties, Devon made a note in his tablet. Whistleblower protection, critical component of Thompson Protocol. Review Miguel's personnel file. Potential role in implementation. Emma Wilson once again approached Devon's seat, this time carrying a small notebook. Mr. Thompson, I hope I'm not bothering you, but... She hesitated, gathering courage. I'm thinking about studying business ethics in college, and I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions. For my personal research. Devon smiled warmly. I'd be happy to speak with you, Emma. She sat in the empty seat beside him, opening her notebook. When you experienced discrimination today, you didn't get angry or vengeful. You stayed calm but took decisive action. Is that a conscious strategy? Very perceptive question. Devon nodded. Yes, it is. Anger, however justified, often undermines credibility, especially for people of color. More importantly, lasting change doesn't come from emotional reactions. It comes from transforming structures and expectations. Emma wrote quickly. My father always taught me that business is about profit above all else, but you seem to prioritize values even when they might cost money in the short term. Devon glanced toward Richard, who was pretending not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. The great misconception in business is that values and profitability are opposed, Devon explained. An airline where every passenger feels respected and valued will ultimately outperform one where certain passengers are treated as unwelcome regardless of their ticket. So doing the right thing is also good business? Emma asked. In the long run, always, Devon confirmed. The problem is that too many executives are incentivized to think quarter by quarter instead of decade by decade. Emma looked thoughtful. This incident today, it's going to change things, isn't it? That depends on what happens next, Devon replied. Incidents become turning points only when they lead to structural change, not just individual consequences. What happens to people like Jennifer and Victoria? Emma asked. Do they just get fired and nothing changes? Devon appreciated her concern with the bigger picture. That's a crucial question. Simple punishment doesn't create transformation. There needs to be accountability, yes, but also pathways to learning and growth. Emma's questions continued, each more thoughtful than the last. Devon answered, patiently aware that Richard and Pamela were listening intently, despite their pretense of disinterest. Would you... Emma hesitated, then pushed forward. Would you be willing to be interviewed for my college application essay I want to write about ethical leadership and what happened today? Devon was touched by her earnestness. I'd be happy to. Here's my card. Have your parents contact my office to arrange it. Emma took the business card, her expression brightening. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. This means so much to me. As she returned to her seat, Emma paused by her father's row. Dad, she said just loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, you always taught me to admit when I'm wrong. Maybe you should practice what you preach. From across the aisle, Laura Garcia observed the interaction with approval. When Emma finally returned to her seat, Laura moved to take her place. "Mr. Thompson," she began. "Laura Garcia, CEO of Tech Fusion." "I know who you are, Ms. Garcia." Devon smiled, shaking her hand. "Your work in renewable energy storage is impressive." Laura seemed pleased by the recognition. "Thank you. I wanted to tell you that what you did today matters beyond this flight. I fly over 200,000 miles annually, and what happened to you happens to me at least once a month. And yet most airlines claim these are isolated incidents," Devon noted. "Exactly," Laura agreed. "Having someone in your position acknowledge the pattern publicly, it's significant. The acknowledgement is just the beginning," Devon assured her. "Meaningful action will follow." Their conversation shifted to business, two CEOs discussing industry challenges and opportunities. The ease of their interaction drew attention from other passengers, particularly Richard Wilson, whose expression betrayed a dawning realization that he'd been excluded from a circle of influence he hadn't even known existed. "I'm hosting a forum on ethical business practices next month," Laura mentioned. "In light of today, would you consider being our keynote speaker? I'd be honored," Devon replied. "Send the details to my office." Midway through the flight, Jackson Williams approached Devon again. "Sir, we've received numerous messages from headquarters. The board is requesting an emergency meeting upon your arrival." Devon nodded. "I expected as much." Also, Jackson continued more quietly, "Social media is already reporting on the incident. Mr. Parker's video has been shared extensively." Devon glanced toward Anthony Parker, who gave an unapologetic shrug. "The truth deserves witnesses," Anthony said simply. "I agree," Devon replied. "No need for damage control, Jackson. Let the story spread." As the flight progressed, a subtle transformation occurred in the cabin. Passengers who had initially avoided eye contact with Devon now sought opportunities to engage. Those who had witnessed the incident without speaking up seemed eager to demonstrate they weren't complicit. Eleanor Simmons, the elderly woman who had spoken up during the confrontation, moved to sit briefly in the empty seat beside Devon. "I've been flying for over 50 years, she told him. "What you experienced today is nothing new. It's just rarely challenged by someone with the power to do something about it." Richard Wilson, however, remained isolated in his own discomfort, watching as his social capital diminished with each passing hour. When he finally stood to use the restroom, he paused beside Devon's seat. "Mr. Thompson," he began awkwardly, "I want to apologize for my behavior earlier. It was inappropriate." Devon studied him carefully. "Are you apologizing because you recognize your words were prejudiced, or because you discovered I'm the CEO?" Richard flushed, unable to answer the direct question. "That's what I thought," Devon said quietly. "Real change starts with honesty, Mr. Wilson, even if it's uncomfortable." Richard retreated to the restroom, the interaction observed by several passengers, including his daughter. Emma's expression reflected both embarrassment and resolve, a young woman witnessing her father's flaws while determining to be different. As the flight began its descent into New York, Devon reviewed his notes on his tablet, detailed observations about every aspect of the service, the environment, and the underlying culture they revealed. This hadn't been just an isolated incident of discrimination. It had been a window into structural problems that required fundamental reform. His phone vibrated with another message from a Thompson Protocol framework, ready for your review upon landing. "Team assembled. This is the moment you've been preparing for." Indeed it was. For years, Devon had been collecting data-building evidence and developing a comprehensive approach to addressing bias within his organization. Today's incident wasn't the cause of the Thompson Protocol. It was the catalyst to finally implement what he had long envisioned. The wheels of Atlantic Airways Flight 302 touched down at JFK International Airport at 4:17 p.m. Eastern Time. But the real journey, the transformation of an airline and perhaps an industry, was just beginning. Would you have the courage to use your position to create change like Devon did, or would you simply accept the apology and move on? What would you do in his position? Share your thoughts. Below, 1 week after the incident, the executive boardroom of Skyline Aviation's New York headquarters buzzed with tension. 22 board members and senior executives sat around the massive table, their usual confident demeanors replaced by anxious anticipation. Digital displays on the walls showed Atlantic Airways' stock price down 3.2%, since news of the incident had broken alongside social media analytics tracking the viral spread of #Seat1A and #Dignity in flight. Devon Thompson entered precisely at 9:00 a.m., followed by Thomas Reynolds and Jackson Williams. The room immediately fell silent. "Good morning." Devon began taking his place at the head of the table. "I assume you've all reviewed the incident report and watched the videos." Murmurs of confirmation circulated around the table. "Then you understand why we're here," Devon continued. "What happened on Flight 302 wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a cultural failure that we must address immediately and comprehensively." He nodded to his assistant, who distributed tablets to everyone present. "This is the Thompson Protocol, a complete overhaul of our training, evaluation, and accountability systems." The executives began scrolling through the document, their expressions a mixture of surprise and concern at its scope. Devon observed their reactions carefully, noting who looked resistant and who seemed receptive. "This goes far beyond standard diversity training," noted Eleanor Richards, the 58-year-old chief operations officer. "You're proposing fundamental structural changes to how we hire, train, evaluate, and compensate everyone from gate agents to executives." "Exactly," Devon confirmed. "Because standard diversity training clearly isn't working." He stood, moving to the display screen, where he brought up key points from the protocol. "First, we're implementing blind initial screening for all hiring, removing names, photos, and demographic indicators from first-round applications." Devon continued through the points. "Second, we're overhauling performance metrics. Currently, our flight attendants are primarily evaluated on feedback from our highest-spending customers. That creates an inherent bias toward pleasing people who look like our traditional customer base while potentially dismissing concerns from others." He advanced to the next slide. "Third, we're establishing clear accountability paths for reporting and addressing bias incidents with protection for those who speak up." Several executives shifted uncomfortably, no doubt calculating the costs and complications these changes would bring. Fourth, Devon continued, "We're instituting regular blind testing, sending diverse mystery passengers through our system to evaluate how they're treated compared to our traditional customer profile." Fifth, compensation for managers and executives will now be tied partially to equity metrics, meaning your bonuses depend on creating a truly inclusive environment. From the far end of the table, William Porter, the 63-year-old executive VP of operations, cleared his throat. "Devon, I've been in aviation for 40 years. While I understand your personal frustration, this seems like an overreaction to a single incident." Devon fixed William with a steady gaze. "Is it a single incident, William? Because our data suggests otherwise." He pulled up a new slide showing customer satisfaction ratings broken down by demographic groups, revealing significant disparities in how passengers of color rated their experiences. "For 3 years, we've been collecting this data quietly," Devon explained. Black passengers rate their first-class experience 23% lower than white passengers with identical itineraries. Hispanic passengers report being asked to verify their seating assignments at twice the rate of white passengers. Asian passengers receive fewer offers of premium services. The room fell silent as the executives absorbed the implications. "This isn't about my personal experience," Devon continued. "It's about a pattern that affects thousands of passengers every day. We just happen to have the data to prove it now." Charles Whitaker, the 62-year-old CFO, spoke next. "Devon, while I understand the sentiment behind these changes, have we considered the financial implications? Implementation alone will cost millions, not to mention potential resistance from shareholders. Devon fixed Charles with a steady gaze. The video of me being told to go to economy has been viewed 17 million times in 6 days. Our customer service lines have received over 4,000 calls from passengers of color sharing similar experiences. The financial implication of not addressing this problem is far greater than the cost of fixing it. He pulled up another slide showing projected impact. Our research shows that travelers from minority backgrounds represent over $108 billion in annual spending potential. We've been effectively alienating a massive market through biased treatment. The business case was compelling, silencing further financial objections. Alexandra Marshall. Chief Legal Officer raised a different concern. We need to be careful about how we address the Jennifer Bailey and Victoria Lawrence terminations. Their legal team has already suggested potential wrongful termination claims, arguing they were following standard procedures. Were they? Devon asked pointedly. Was it standard procedure to direct passengers to economy without verifying their tickets? To suggest a passenger with a confirmed first-class reservation should sit in economy while they sort things out? If so, then we have an even bigger problem than I thought. Alexandra nodded, conceding the point. Fair enough. But we should expect some pushback, especially from the flight attendants' union. I welcome that conversation, Devon replied, because it will force us all to be explicit about what our standard procedures actually are and who they're designed to protect. There's one more announcement, Devon said. I've established a new executive position, Chief Dignity Officer, responsible for overseeing these changes and ensuring our values are reflected in our operations. Speculation rippled through the room about who would fill this powerful new role. I've selected Miguel Rodriguez for this position, Devon announced. Shocked murmurs erupted around the table. Thomas Reynolds nearly choked on his water. Miguel is a flight attendant, Thomas sputtered. He has no executive experience. Miguel has 7 years of frontline experience seeing exactly how our policies actually play out in practice, Devon countered. He understands the reality of our operation in ways most executives never will. And he demonstrated something crucial during the incident: moral awareness, even when he lacked the courage to act on it. Devon advanced to the final slide. Miguel will be partnered with Laura Garcia, who has agreed to join our board and head the new Passenger Dignity Committee. The boardroom erupted in discussion, executives turning to one another with a mixture of concern and excitement about the radical changes being proposed. Devon allowed the conversation to continue for several minutes before raising his hand for silence. I understand these changes feel dramatic, he acknowledged, but they're necessary. What happened to me happens to passengers every day. Passengers who don't have the power to ground the plane or fire the crew. We have an opportunity to lead our industry in creating a travel experience where every person is treated with equal dignity. He surveyed the room, meeting each person's gaze. This isn't optional, and it isn't up for debate. The Thompson Protocol will be implemented beginning next week. The only question is whether you want to be part of that transformation. As the meeting concluded, Dr. James Harrington approached Devon privately. You've been waiting for this moment for years, the older man observed. How does it feel now that it's here? Devon considered the question carefully. Like opening a door that's been locked for too long. There will be resistance on the other side, but at least now we can walk through. James nodded. Remember what I told you when you started? Skyline change isn't about making noise, it's about creating echoes that continue long after you've stopped speaking. I remember Devon smiled. And this is just the beginning of those echoes. 3 days later, Devon stood on the stage of Atlantic Airways Training Center in Dallas, facing 500 employees gathered for the official announcement. Behind him, large screens displayed the new company manifesto. Dignity is not an upgrade, it's our standard. I stand before you today, not as your CEO, but as a passenger who experienced firsthand how bias can infect our service. Devon began. What I encountered isn't unusual. It happens every day to passengers who don't look like traditional first-class travelers. He paced across the stage, making eye contact with different sections of the audience. Starting today, we're implementing the Thompson Protocol, a comprehensive approach to ensuring every passenger receives equal respect regardless of appearance, accent, or background. Devon outlined the key components, emphasizing that this wasn't just about avoiding discrimination, but about actively creating an environment of dignity. This will require courage, he acknowledged. The courage to recognize bias in ourselves and others. The courage to speak up when you see someone being mistreated. The courage to admit when we've made mistakes. He paused, letting his words sink in. Some people won't understand what we're doing. They'll call it political correctness or virtue signaling, but treating every human being with dignity isn't political, it's fundamental. Devon gestured to the side of the stage where Miguel Rodriguez waited. I'd like to introduce your new Chief Dignity Officer, Miguel Rodriguez. Miguel walked onto the stage to surprised applause. He looked nervous but determined as he took the microphone. I've been a flight attendant for 7 years, Miguel began. I've seen the subtle ways we sometimes treat passengers differently based on how they look. And I've stayed silent too often, afraid of risking my job. His voice grew stronger. But that changes today. Under the Thompson Protocol, speaking up isn't a risk, it's a responsibility. And nobody will face retaliation for defending our values. As Miguel outlined the practical changes coming to training and operations, Devon observed the audience reactions. Some employees looked inspired, others concerned, a few resistant. Transformation wouldn't happen overnight, but it had begun. Across the country, news outlets covered the story extensively. The viral video of Devon being directed to economy had sparked a national conversation about traveling while Black and the everyday indignities faced by passengers of color. Atlantic Airways' main competitor, United Continental, had quickly announced their own passenger respect initiative, though industry insiders noted it lacked the substantive changes of the Thompson Protocol. Several international carriers reached out to Devon directly, requesting consultations on implementing similar reforms. Within the company, reaction to the changes was mixed. Some managers quietly pushed back, claiming the new protocols would slow operations and create unnecessary complications. Others embraced the opportunity, seeing it as long overdue. William Porter, who had expressed skepticism in the board meeting, surprisingly emerged as one of the protocol's strongest advocates after attending the first training session. I've been in this industry for 40 years, he told a group of regional managers, and I never realized how many blind spots I had until now. Richard Wilson had been identified by internet sleuths and was facing his own consequences. His law firm, concerned about reputational damage, had placed him on administrative leave pending sensitivity training. Pamela Wilson had resigned from 3 charity boards after fellow members expressed concerns about her witnessed behavior. For Jennifer Bailey and Victoria Lawrence, the consequences were more direct. After a thorough review that examined their past passenger interactions, and discovered a pattern of differential treatment, both had been terminated for violations of company values. However, in an unexpected move that surprised many, Devon had authorized a new program offering former employees terminated for bias-related issues an opportunity for reinstatement after completing intensive training and demonstrating genuine change. This isn't about punishment, he explained to skeptical reporters. It's about transformation. People can change if given the right tools and motivation. Emma Wilson, meanwhile, had become something of a minor internet hero for standing up to her parents. Her social media following had grown exponentially as she used her platform to discuss privilege and accountability among her peers. Her college application essay, "The Day My Father Showed Me Who Not to Be," had been excerpted in several online publications. 2 weeks after the incident, Devon received a handwritten letter from Catherine Ward, a flight attendant who had been on board Flight 302, but not directly involved in the confrontation. "What you did changed everything," she wrote. Yesterday, I watched a colleague intervene when another attendant tried to redirect a Hispanic family from first class to economy. 2 months ago, that intervention would never have happened. Thank you for giving us the courage to be better. Devon pinned the note to his office bulletin board, a small but significant sign that real change was possible. Another note arrived from an unexpected source, a brief message from Richard Wilson that simply read, "My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 2 weeks. She says she won't until I truly understand what I did wrong. I'm trying to learn. Is there someone at your organization I could speak with?" Devon forwarded the note to Miguel with a simple instruction. This is what real change looks like. One difficult conversation at a time. Let's make space for it. What do you think of the Thompson Protocol? Which element would make the biggest difference in creating truly equal treatment for all passengers? Share your thoughts in the comments. 3 months after Flight 302, Devon stood in the gleaming atrium of Atlantic Airways' new training center. Sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, illuminating the central feature, a striking sculpture depicting diverse passengers ascending a spiral staircase, each figure rendered with equal dignity and presence. At the base of the sculpture, a simple plaque read, "Every journey begins with recognition." Today marked the official opening of the center and the graduation of the first class of flight attendants and gate agents trained under the Thompson Protocol. The atmosphere buzzed with media presence and the excited conversations of graduates in their crisp new uniforms. This represents more than just a building or a training program, Devon addressed the assembled crowd. It represents a fundamental shift in how we understand our mission as an airline. Behind him on the stage sat distinguished guests including Laura Garcia, now a prominent board member, Miguel Rodriguez, whose confidence had grown into his executive role, and surprisingly, Emma Wilson invited as a youth representative on the new Passenger Dignity Committee. 3 months ago, I experienced firsthand how bias can manifest in our industry. Devon continued. Today, I'm proud to say that Incident has catalyzed meaningful change, not just in policies, but in how we think about the human beings who choose to fly with us. He gestured to the first row of graduates. These professionals have completed the most comprehensive training program in the industry. Beyond service skills, they've engaged in scenario-based learning that prepares them to recognize and counter bias in all its forms. Miguel stepped forward to explain the practical aspects of the training. Our graduates have participated in role reversal exercises where they experience travel from multiple perspectives. They've studied actual incidents of bias and workshopped appropriate interventions. Most importantly, they've learned that dignity isn't something we offer as an upgrade. It's the foundation of everything we do. One by one, graduates came forward to share their experiences with the new approach. Danielle Foster, the 29-year-old flight attendant who had served on Devon's flight after Jennifer was removed, spoke passionately. Before the Thompson Protocol, we were trained to prioritize certain passengers over others, not explicitly, but through subtle messaging about who our premium customers were. Now we understand that every passenger deserves equal respect, regardless of appearance, accent, or ticket class. The transformation extended beyond training. Atlantic Airways had implemented visible changes throughout the passenger experience. New signage in all terminals explicitly stated the airline's commitment to equal dignity for all passengers. The boarding process had been redesigned to eliminate opportunities for subjective gatekeeping by agents. A simple but powerful feedback system allowed passengers to report both positive and negative experiences related to dignity and respect. Customer satisfaction metrics were now broken down by demographic groups to identify disparities in experience. In the center of the new training facility, a unique feature called the Gate had been installed, a fully functional replica of an aircraft boarding area where trainees practiced recognizing and responding to various scenarios. The door to this simulation area was a special design. One side appeared as a standard aircraft door, but the other featured a mirrored surface that forced employees to see their own reflection before entering. It served as a powerful reminder to check personal biases before interacting with passengers. Perhaps most significantly, the airline had established the Industry Council for Dignity in Travel, inviting competitors to join in adopting similar standards. 3 major airlines had already signed on, recognizing both the ethical imperative and the business advantages of creating truly inclusive travel experiences. However, the path hadn't been entirely smooth. Initial implementation had faced significant challenges. Some veteran employees resisted the changes, complaining about political correctness. A vocal minority of elite customers objected to what they perceived as a dilution of their special status, and operations initially slowed as staff adjusted to new procedures. Thomas Reynolds, who had initially feared these changes would disrupt operations, now stood as one of their strongest advocates. After significant self-reflection and learning, he had become instrumental in implementing the protocol across regional operations. "What I've learned over these months," Thomas addressed the audience, "is that what seemed like special treatment for some passengers was actually just the basic dignity all passengers should expect. The standards weren't too high, they were inconsistently applied." After the formal ceremony, Devon toured the training facilities with Laura Garcia and several journalists. The centerpiece was the simulation cabin, where trainees experienced scenarios designed to test and strengthen their commitment to equal treatment. "Watch this," Miguel said proudly, gesturing toward a simulation in progress. Inside the mock-up cabin, a trainee was responding to a scenario where one passenger questioned another's presence in first class. The trainee calmly but firmly addressed the situation. "Sir, every passenger in this cabin has been verified and belongs in their assigned seat. We're honored to serve everyone in this section equally." Laura nodded approvingly. It seems simple, but that kind of clear, immediate response prevents situations from escalating and sends a powerful message about your values. The key insight, Devon added, was realizing that most discriminatory incidents persist because bystanders, including our own staff, feel unsure about how to respond. By providing clear protocols and extensive practice, we've eliminated that uncertainty. As they continued the tour, Devon noticed Jackson Williams, now promoted to Vice President of Cabin Experience, speaking with a familiar face, Anthony Parker, whose video had helped catalyze the public response to the incident. "Mr. Parker has joined our Passenger Advisory Council," Jackson explained. "His experience as a frequent traveler who has faced bias gives us valuable perspective." Anthony shook Devon's hand warmly. "What you've built here goes beyond corporate PR. It's creating real change in how people experience travel." The tour continued to a small, easily missed room labeled simply 1A. Inside was a single first-class airplane seat, the actual seat from Flight 302, now serving as a physical reminder of the incident that had sparked transformation. Beside it, a digital display shared anonymous testimonials from passengers who had experienced bias during air travel. "We keep this here to ensure we never forget why we're doing this work," Miguel explained to the journalists. "It's not an abstract policy. It's about real people having real experiences." The tour concluded in the Heritage Hall, where Atlantic Airways history was displayed alongside the company's evolution. A section dedicated to Flight 302 presented the incident honestly, neither sensationalizing nor minimizing its significance. "We don't hide from our failures," Devon explained to the journalists. "We learn from them." A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Thompson, some industry analysts suggested these changes would hurt your bottom line. Has that been the case?" Devon smiled. "Actually, the opposite has occurred. After an initial adjustment period, passenger satisfaction scores have increased by 24% across all demographics. Bookings from minority travelers are up 31%. Employee retention has improved by 18%. Treating people with dignity isn't just right, it's good business." "And what about international implementation?" another journalist asked. "Several European and Asian carriers have expressed interest in the Thompson Protocol. we're working with partners around the world to adapt the core principles to different cultural contexts, Devon confirmed. Dignity is a universal value, even if its expression varies across cultures. As the media interviews concluded, Devon found himself momentarily alone with Emma Wilson, now 17, and increasingly confident in her role as a youth advocate. "My father still hasn't really apologized," she confided. "But he's different now. Quieter, more thoughtful. Sometimes I catch him watching the news coverage of all this, and I think he's actually listening." Devon nodded. "Change isn't always announced with grand gestures. Sometimes it's quiet, internal, revealed only in small shifts of behavior." "He's attending sensitivity training sessions," Emma continued. "Not just the mandatory ones from his firm, but additional workshops on his own time. He won't talk about it, but I found the books on his nightstand." "That's significant," Devon observed. "Do you think he'll ever really understand?" Emma asked. "I don't know," Devon answered honestly. "Understanding isn't always necessary for change. Sometimes behavior shifts first and understanding follows." Emma considered this. "My college application essay is about what happened on that flight about standing up when others stay silent. I hope that's okay." "More than okay," Devon assured her. "Your voice that day mattered." "It still does." "There's one more thing," Emma said hesitantly. "I've started a student organization at my school, Dignity in Action. We're focused on helping teens recognize and respond to bias in everyday situations. Would you consider speaking to our group sometime?" Devon smiled warmly. "I'd be honored." As evening fell, Devon stood alone in the empty atrium reflecting on the journey of the past 3 months. The transformation had been faster and more comprehensive than he had dared to hope, though he knew the work was far from complete. His phone buzzed with a notification. Atlantic Airways had just won the Industry Excellence Award for Inclusive Travel Experience, an honor created specifically to recognize their innovations under the Thompson Protocol. But more meaningful than the award was the message that followed, a compilation of testimonials from passengers of color who had experienced the difference in their recent flights. "For the first time in my life, I boarded a plane without bracing for disrespect," one passenger wrote. "I watched a flight attendant intervene when another passenger questioned my seat assignment. I've never felt so supported," shared another. "My children noticed the difference. They asked why the crew was so nice to us this time. That question broke my heart and gave me hope simultaneously," a father reported. Devon smiled, pocketing his phone as he headed toward the exit. The real measure of success wasn't awards or headlines. It was in these individual experiences of dignity preserved. The final surprise of the evening waited for him in the lobby. Jennifer Bailey, the flight attendant whose actions had triggered the entire sequence of events. After her termination, she had undergone the intensive reflection program Devon had established, eventually writing him a letter that acknowledged the depth of her biases and her commitment to change. Against the recommendations of many, Devon had offered her a new role not in customer service but in training, where her first-hand experience with bias and its consequences provided powerful lessons for others. "Mr. Thompson," she said quietly as he approached. "I just finished my first day as a training assistant." "How did it go?" Devon asked. "Hard," she admitted. "Facing my mistakes in front of others isn't easy, but necessary." "And what was the most important thing you learned today?" Devon asked. Jennifer considered the question carefully. "That dignity isn't something we give to people. It's something we recognize they already have." Devon nodded, satisfied with her answer. "Exactly." Outside, his driver waited to take him to the airport. Tonight, he would fly Atlantic Airways again, not undercover this time, but as himself, observing the ongoing evolution of the culture he was helping to create. As the car pulled away from the curb, Devon gazed back at the training center, its windows illuminated against the darkening sky. The building was more than concrete and glass. It was a physical manifestation of a commitment to change, a promise that the path to dignity would remain open for everyone. Has there been a moment when you saw real change happen in an organization? What made it effective? Share your experience in the comments. 6 months after the incident on Flight 302. Devon Thompson once again stood in line at Los Angeles International Airport, waiting to board an Atlantic Airways flight to New York. This time he wore no disguise of anonymity. His face had become well known after the viral video and subsequent media coverage of the Thompson Protocol. Yet unlike most CEOs who might take advantage of special boarding privileges, Devon waited in the standard first-class line, observing the subtle but significant changes in the boarding process. Gate agents made eye contact equally with all passengers. The script had been standardized to eliminate subjective judgments. Most importantly, there was a palpable atmosphere of respect that extended to everyone regardless of appearance. When he reached the front of the line, the gate agent, Danielle Foster, now promoted to Senior Customer Experience Specialist, smiled in recognition. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she said warmly. "It's an honor to have you on our flight today." Devon noticed she greeted the passenger behind him, an elderly Hispanic woman, with identical warmth and respect. The consistency wasn't forced or mechanical. It had become natural, embedded in the culture. As Devon moved through the jetway, he remembered his conversation with Dr. Harrington after implementing the Thompson Protocol. Real change isn't when people do the right thing because they're being watched, his mentor had told him. It's when they do the right thing even when no one's looking. Boarding the aircraft, Devon was struck by how different the atmosphere felt from 6 months ago. The first-class cabin hummed with the same quiet luxury, but there was an underlying current of inclusivity that hadn't existed before. Flight attendants moved through the cabin with attentive professionalism, their interactions consistent across all passengers. On the bulkhead wall near Seat 1A, his seat Devon noticed a small, elegant plaque that hadn't been there before. It read simply, "Every seat has a story. Every passenger deserves dignity." It was one of many subtle reminders now present throughout the Atlantic Airways fleet. As Devon settled into Seat 1A, the same seat from that fateful flight, he overheard a conversation between 2 flight attendants in the galley. "Remember to check the Thompson standards for the mid-flight service," one reminded the other. "Already reviewed them during pre-flight," came the response. "Every passenger gets the same options presented the same way." Devon smiled to himself. The protocol had become part of the operational vocabulary, integrated into daily practices rather than treated as a special initiative. Throughout the flight, Devon observed dozens of small but meaningful changes. The language and announcements had been carefully crafted to be inclusive. The in-flight magazine featured diverse travelers in all cabin classes. Even the menu offered options reflecting various cultural preferences without stereotyping. But perhaps the most significant moment came midway through the flight. A young black businessman boarded during a stopover in Chicago, taking his assigned first-class seat. Devon watched as another passenger, an older white executive, raised an eyebrow and summoned a flight attendant. "I think there might be some confusion with the seating," the executive said, nodding toward the black passenger. The flight attendant, Michael Chen, responded without hesitation or discomfort. "Sir, all of our passengers are verified before boarding. Everyone in this cabin is exactly where they belong. Can I get you anything else?" The directness of the response, delivered with professionalism rather than confrontation, left no room for further questioning. The executive merely nodded and returned to his magazine. The young black passenger, who had tensed slightly at the interaction, relaxed again, dignity intact. Michael caught Devon's eye briefly, neither seeking approval nor showing pride, just doing his job as it should be done. This was the Thompson Protocol in action, not a special response, but a new standard. Later in the flight, Devon struck up a conversation with the young businessman, who had no idea he was speaking to the CEO. "I fly a lot for business," the man shared. "Used to dread it because of how I was treated. This airline's different now. Can't put my finger on exactly how, but I don't feel like I need to prove I belong here anymore. That simple statement, I don't feel like I need to prove I belong, captured exactly what the Thompson Protocol had been designed to achieve. As the flight descended toward New York, Devon reflected on the broader impact of the past 6 months. The protocol had spread beyond Atlantic Airways, with 4 major competitors adopting similar standards. The viral video had sparked a national conversation about traveling while Black that extended to other industries. Most importantly, thousands of travelers who had previously faced subtle or overt discrimination were now experiencing dignity as the standard, not the exception. After landing, Devon made his way through JFK Airport, where Atlantic Airways had redesigned its terminal experience to reflect the same principles of equal dignity. The centerpiece was a new customer service area where all passengers, regardless of ticket class, received the same level of attention and respect. The old roped-off sections that had physically separated premium customers from regular travelers had been replaced with a more integrated approach that maintained efficiency without sacrificing equality. At the curbside, his driver waited beside a company car. "How was your flight, sir?" the driver asked as they pulled away from the terminal. "Perfectly ordinary," Devon replied with a smile. And that was the victory that a Black man could have a perfectly ordinary first-class experience, free from the extra scrutiny, the subtle doubts, the burden of proving he belonged. Back at Skyline headquarters, Devon found Miguel Rodriguez waiting in his office with the quarterly Dignity Metrics report. The data showed continued improvement across all measures. Complaints of discriminatory treatment down 87%, positive feedback up 42%, and perhaps most tellingly, a 23% increase in repeat bookings from diverse passengers. The numbers tell one story, Miguel said, but the testimonials tell an even more powerful one. He handed Devon a tablet displaying messages from passengers and employees alike sharing how the changes had affected their experiences. One flight attendant wrote, "I used to struggle with certain passengers because I wasn't even aware of my own biases. The Thompson training didn't just change how I treat passengers, it changed how I see people." Devon set the tablet down, satisfied but not complacent. "We've made good progress, but there's still work to do." "Always will be," Miguel agreed. "But the foundation is solid now." "What about the Pathway program?" Devon asked, referring to the initiative they had created for employees terminated due to bias incidents. "Jennifer Bailey is our greatest success story so far," Miguel reported. "She's not only completed her own journey, but is now mentoring others. Victoria Lawrence hasn't applied yet, but we've heard she's doing the preliminary workshops." That evening, Devon attended a transportation industry conference where he had been invited to speak about the protocol's implementation. As he approached the podium, he saw familiar faces in the audience. Laura Garcia, now heading her own corporate dignity initiative. Thomas Reynolds, who had become an unexpected champion of the changes. And even Emma Wilson attending as part of a student leadership program. Devon began not with corporate statistics or business metrics, but with a simple truth. Dignity isn't a luxury amenity. It's the basic foundation upon which all service must be built. He described how what had begun as a response to a single incident had evolved into a comprehensive approach to human interaction, one that recognized the subtle ways bias manifests and provided concrete tools to counter it. "The most powerful question we've integrated into our culture is simply this," Devon explained. "Would I treat every passenger this way, or am I treating this person differently based on assumptions about who they are?" As he concluded his remarks, Devon offered a final reflection. "The true measure of our success isn't in awards or recognition. It's in the countless moments of dignity preserved that no one ever hears about because they shouldn't be remarkable in the first place." The audience rose in standing ovation, but Devon took greater satisfaction in the quiet nods of understanding he saw from industry leaders who had previously dismissed these concerns. 1 year to the day after Flight 302, Devon stood in the newly redesigned Atlantic Airways terminal at LAX, where a simple plaque had been installed near Gate 23, the gate from which that momentous flight had departed. The plaque read, "From this gate, a journey toward equal dignity began. It continues with every passenger, every flight, every day. Respect is not an upgrade, it's our standard." Beside Devon stood Jennifer Bailey, the flight attendant, whose actions had triggered the entire sequence of events. After her termination, she had undergone intensive reflection and education, eventually writing Devon a letter that acknowledged the depth of her biases and her commitment to change. Against the recommendations of many, Devon had offered her a new role, not in customer service, but in training, where her first-hand experience with bias and its consequences provided powerful lessons for others. "Do you ever regret it?" Jennifer asked quietly. Boarding that flight as just another passenger instead of as the CEO, Devon considered the question. Not for a moment. Had I boarded as the CEO, I would have received perfect service and learned nothing about the real experience of our passengers. Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. "I think about that day constantly, how quickly I judged you, how certain I was that I was right. The scary part is that I didn't even recognize what I was doing." "That's why this work matters," Devon replied. "Bias is most dangerous when it's invisible to those who hold it." From behind them came a familiar voice. "Mr. Thompson." Devon turned to find Emma Wilson, now a high school senior, approaching with her father Richard the first time Devon had seen him since the flight. Emma Devon smiled. "Good to see you again. I wanted to let you know I got into Yale," she said proudly. "The essay about what happened on the flight, they specifically mentioned it in my acceptance letter." "Congratulations," Devon replied. "They're lucky to have you." Richard Wilson stood awkwardly behind his daughter, clearly uncomfortable, but making the effort to be present. After a moment's hesitation, he extended his hand to Devon. "Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice lacking its former arrogance, "I owe you an apology. A real one this time." Devon shook his hand, noting the humility that had replaced Richard's previous condescension. "I've spent the last year learning just how wrong I was," Richard continued. "Not just on that flight, but in how I've moved through the world. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that what you did, it changed more than just an airline." Devon nodded, recognizing the genuine effort it had taken for this man to acknowledge his failings. "Thank you for saying that, Mr. Wilson." As Richard and Emma continued to their gate, Jennifer observed, "That's the part no one expected, how this would change people beyond our company." Devon gazed out the terminal windows at an Atlantic Airways plane preparing for departure, its fuselage bearing the new company tagline, "Dignity in Flight." "The greatest privilege of power," Devon said, "isn't using it to secure special treatment for yourself. It's using it to ensure equal treatment for everyone else." As passengers streamed past them toward waiting aircraft, Devon observed what few would notice: the consistent respect shown to each traveler, the absence of the subtle signals of exclusion that had once been so common. Not perfect yet, perhaps, but profoundly changed. The journey that had begun with those 9 cutting words, "This seat is for real passengers. Economy is in the back," had transformed not just an airline, but an industry's understanding of what service truly meant: dignity for every passenger, without exception, every time. And in the quiet satisfaction of watching that transformation unfold, Devon Thompson found his greatest achievement yet. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Together we can create spaces where dignity is never an upgrade, just the standard we all deserve. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to see more powerful stories of transformation and justice. And tell us in the comments, what will you do to recognize the dignity in everyone you meet today?